I heard it with my own ears. Why is she even still alive? The words didn't come like a shout or a snap or the kind of careless cruelty young people like to toss around as jokes. No. This one arrived soft, low, blunt as a stone, a question asked without urgency, without guilt. Just truth, as they saw it. Then came the laugh. Thin, sharp, the precise sound of someone tearing old cloth. It split through something I hadn't realized was still tender inside me. I stood behind the wooden gate, holding a glass dish of peach cobbler, still warm from my oven. I had wrapped the edges with a towel so I wouldn't burn my fingers. My hands didn't tremble. Not yet. I'm not a woman who shakes easily. I've survived too much for that. I didn't turn around, didn't walk back to my car, didn't let the dish slip from my hands no matter how much I wanted the excuse to leave. Instead, I opened the gate. It swung inward with that familiar groan. It always groaned, even when Carl was little and we used to oil the hinges together. Past the string lights they'd hung freshly for the barbecue, past the picnic tables covered in disposable tablecloths patterned with lemons, past the half-turned faces of people who paused long enough to notice someone entering, but not long enough to greet me. Some of them were my blood. Some were strangers, wearing the kind of smiles that disappear when you blink. No. This one arrived soft, low, blunt as a stone. A question asked without urgency, without guilt. Just truth, as they saw it. Then came the laugh. Thin, sharp, the precise sound of someone tearing old cloth. It split through something I hadn't realized was still tender inside me. I stood behind the wooden gate, holding a glass dish of peach cobbler, still warm from my oven. I had wrapped the edges with a towel so I wouldn't burn my fingers. My hands didn't tremble. Not yet. I'm not a woman who shakes easily. I've survived too much for that. I didn't turn around, didn't walk back to my car, didn't let the dish slip from my hands no matter how much I wanted the excuse to leave. Instead, I opened the gate. It swung inward with that familiar groan. It always groaned, even when Carl was little and we used to oil the hinges together. Past the string lights they'd hung freshly for the barbecue, past the picnic tables covered in disposable tablecloths patterned with lemons, past the half-turned faces of people who paused long enough to notice someone entering, but not long enough to greet me. Some of them were my blood. Some were strangers, wearing the kind of smiles that disappear when you blink. None of them smiled at me. I walked in as though I hadn't heard the words at all. Jody saw me first. Or maybe she had seen me earlier but was hoping I'd turn around before she had to acknowledge me. "Oh, Mabel, we didn't know you were coming." It was the same voice that had asked why I was still alive. I recognized it by the tightness at the end of the sentence, that little lift she always used when she was pretending to be surprised. "I brought cobbler," I said. She didn't reach for it. No one did. People turned away, as if the smell of grilled meat was more interesting than acknowledging my existence. I found an empty seat at the far end of the long folding table. The metal chair groaned under me, as if even it wanted to protest my presence. My back ached the moment I sat, but I straightened anyway. I have spent a lifetime straightening my back in places where I felt small. Music blared through a portable speaker, something too fast, too loud, too modern for anyone with aging ears. Children squealed, people laughed, drinks clinked. And I watched. Carl, my son, stood at the center of it all. He's 41 now, but sometimes I still see the 5-year-old who used to run to me with scraped knees, the 15-year-old who slammed doors but always came back for dinner, the 24-year-old who moved home for 8 months after his first heartbreak and cried against my shoulder like he did when he was little. Now he barely glanced my way. Halfway through the afternoon, he raised his beer and said, "To family." Glasses lifted, a chorus of cheers. Not a single face turned toward me, not even his. My 3 grandchildren ran past me, twice, then a third time, little streaks of energy and laughter. They didn't look up, didn't wave, didn't say, "Hi, Grandma." I wondered if they even recognized me without a grocery bag in my hand, or a casserole pan, or an envelope of birthday money they used to snatch eagerly before running off. I used to bring them gummy worms in tiny plastic bags. They used to squeal, "Nana, Nana, Nana." Now, I was furniture. Background. Air. Eventually, Jody approached. Her smile stretched thin as the plastic wrap covering the potato salad. She asked, "Did you want a plate?" I looked up at her. "I'm fine." She nodded, too quickly, as though relieved, and walked away before I could say another word. She always walked away too soon, like she was afraid kindness might be expected of her if she lingered. I stayed until the very end, the way I was raised. My mother taught me never to leave a gathering without helping, even if the people didn't deserve help. So I gathered plates, stacked them neatly, folded the napkins that were still clean, wiped down the sticky table where someone had spilled juice. By then, they had all moved inside. The music had stopped, replaced by the muffled sounds of people laughing in the living room. I wasn't invited in. The door stayed half closed. I picked up my empty dish, the sun had warmed the glass, and let myself out quietly, not in anger, not in sorrow, but with a decision forming slow and heavy, like a storm cloud refusing to break. That night, I cleaned the cobbler dish with careful hands, not hurried, not distracted. I washed it the way I used to wash Carl's clothes when he was little, slow, thoughtful, letting memories crowd the small spaces of habit. When the dish was dry, I set it in the cabinet. Then I paused and looked at it longer than necessary. It was a wedding gift, a gift from me to Jody 15 years ago. I remember the wrapping paper, silver with a blue ribbon. She'd barely glanced at it before setting it aside to open Carl's uncle's gift, the more expensive one. Funny, the things we remember when people hurt us. The next morning, I brewed coffee in my smallest pot, just 1 cup. There was a time I used to make a full pot because Carl liked 2 cups in the morning and I liked to drink mine slowly after he left for work. But now it was just me. 1 cup was enough. I sat at the table by the window, the same table where Carl used to do his homework, elbows too wide, feet kicking the legs of the chair, pencils rolling everywhere. It was strange the way a home can still echo with memories even after everyone stops visiting. I didn't speak to anyone that Sunday. My phone didn't ring. I didn't expect it to. In the afternoon, I went to bring in the mail, but I didn't open the envelopes. I wasn't ready to see his name, Carl's name, on the electricity bill again. That house he lived in, that house they had cooked in, laughed in, raised children in, and waved me away from, used to be mine, or at least the down payment was. $40,000 from my retirement account. "Just to help you get started," I said. "I thought family would always be family." Later that evening, I reached into my filing cabinet and pulled out a folder labeled Carl, House. Inside were the papers, the deed, the purchase agreement, and the notarized letter I had written when I gave him the money. A gift, no expectation of repayment. "Because you're my son." I read that sentence again and again until the words blurred. That night, I called Lena. Not a friend, not exactly, but sharp, honest, a woman who used to work in probate law before her arthritis got too bad. When she answered, I said the words slowly, one at a time, as though admitting something fragile. "Lena, I think I need to understand what I still have a right to." Lena arrived on Monday afternoon, just after 3, the warmest hour of the day. I know this because I had been watching the clock since noon, checking the driveway every few minutes, like a teenager waiting for a date. Pathetic, maybe, but I don't get visitors anymore. Not the kind who come by choice. When her car finally pulled in, a small relief loosened something in my chest that had been tight for months, maybe years. I opened the door before she even made it to the porch. "You're early," I said. "And you're waiting," she replied, with a half smile. "Let me in before my hip locks." I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, carefully, leaning on her cane. She looked older than the last time I'd seen her hair whiter, her shoulders narrower, but her eyes were still sharp as glass. "Sit," I said, gesturing toward the table. "Only if you're sitting too," she answered. We took our usual places, across from each other, where we'd sat years ago after bridge games, after funerals, after gossip-heavy lunches at the community center. This time, though, the air was different, heavier, quieter. I placed the folder, the one labeled Carl House, between us. She didn't touch it at first. "You said you wanted to understand something," she said, gently. "So tell me." It took me longer than it should have to find the words. My throat wasn't tight. I wasn't crying. It was something else, something heavier. "I think I'm being pushed out," I finally said, not with words, with everything else. She nodded slowly, as though she had expected that. "And I want to know," I tapped the folder, "if anything I gave them, money, documents, my signature on anything, means they owe me a place. Not legally," I added quickly, embarrassed at even saying it out loud. "Just formally, on paper. I know they don't owe me affection." Lena let out a long breath and opened the folder. She scanned quickly, professionally, efficiently, flipping through the papers with long practiced fingers that hadn't forgotten how to read fine print. 40,000. A gift. No repayment expected. Yes, that was generous. It was foolish. Her eyes lifted. "No," she said firmly. "That was loving. There's a difference." I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to accept that kindness. She kept reading. After a few minutes, she pushed the papers into a neat stack and folded her hands on top. "Mabel, you have no legal claim on the house, not even a partial one. This letter makes that clear." I nodded. I already knew. "But," she continued, leaning in just a little closer, "you have every personal, moral, emotional reason to feel betrayed, and you're not imagining it. They have shut you out." The words were blunt, true, hard to swallow. I stared at my hands, wrinkled, veins raised, a small brown age spot near the knuckle of my thumb I hadn't noticed before. When did my hands become old hands? When did I? "Do you want it back?" she asked quietly. "The money? The house? The place?" "No." My voice came out faster than expected. "No, I don't want to live there. I don't want to fight them. I don't want a courtroom or documents." "Then what do you want?" A simple question, but I had no simple answer. I wanted to feel like a mother again. I wanted someone to call me. I wanted my son to look at me with the softness he used to have. I wanted my grandchildren to run into my arms like they once did. I wanted not youth, not time back, just belonging. But wanting doesn't make anything grow. I've learned that the hard way.
I want to stop waiting for them, I whispered. Lena's eyes softened. Then she said, "We're not talking about property. We're talking about boundaries." I let the word sit between us. It sounded clinical, but it hummed with something deeper. "I don't know how to make boundaries," I admitted. "My whole life has been giving. Giving is easy. Stopping is unfamiliar." She nodded. "You gave because you loved. That's not weakness. But there comes a point," she tapped my hand gently, "when giving becomes bleeding. And that needs to stop." I didn't cry, but my throat tightened in a way that felt close to it. "So what do I do?" I asked. "First, you stop going where you're not wanted." It felt harsh, necessary. "Second, you invest in someone who does want you." I frowned. "Who is that?" She raised her eyebrow. "Let's start with you." I let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "I don't need self-help speeches." "Good, because I don't give them. What I'm telling you is simpler. You need people. Not them, not necessarily family. People, places, activities, purpose." It sounded foreign, a different language. For 70 years, my purpose had been mothering, caretaking, supporting. Now what was left? She saw the doubt on my face. "Mabel, your life didn't end just because they stopped valuing you. You're not done. There's plenty of living left if you're willing to turn your face toward it." I inhaled slowly. The house smelled like lemon furniture polish and old wooden cabinets. My home. My quiet home. Maybe. "No, maybe," she said, her tone shifting back to brisk. "You're a stubborn woman. Use it. Start small. One new thing this week. One step toward people who see you." I sat back. The words felt strange, possible, intimidating. Then something heavier slipped out of me without warning. "They don't like me," I said. "My own family." "They don't appreciate you," she corrected. "There's a difference. Appreciation can be rebuilt. With others, not them. Liking was never the problem. You were their foundation. People don't look down to check if the floor likes them. They just walk on it." That metaphor struck deeper than I expected. We talked for another hour. About papers, about wills, about the things I never thought I'd need to think about alone. She suggested I update my own documents. She said it kindly, but I heard the truth behind it. She knew I wouldn't be taken care of by the people who should have. After she left, the house fell quiet again. Too quiet. The evening light slanted across the dining room floor, turning it golden. I sat at the table long after the conversation had ended, staring at nothing, or maybe everything. Stop going where you're not wanted. Start going where you are.
The words repeated themselves long after the sun went down. I didn't do anything grand that night. I didn't make promises or resolutions. I didn't throw away old papers or confront anyone. But when I went to bed, something inside me had shifted. Not a healing, not yet, but the beginning of a direction. A small tilt, a turning of the face toward a light I hadn't realized I'd been avoiding. And sometimes in old age, that small shift is the beginning of a new life. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Not from excitement. Old bones don't allow for such luxuries, but from a peculiar restlessness that felt almost like a nudge. A feeling that,
if I stayed in bed too long, the day would slip past me exactly like all the days before it. A life can disappear like that, quietly, politely, without fuss.
The house had its usual sounds, the old fridge humming, a loose shutter tapping rhythmically against the side of the window. The kind of sounds I used to find comforting when Carl lived here. Back then, it meant home, a warm home, a needed home. But now, the noises only reminded me that I was the sole listener. I sat at the kitchen table with my cup of coffee. One cup, the way it had been for years now. The sunlight crept in through the curtains, thin as a blade. Dust floated in it, drifting like slow snow. I watched it a long time. I remembered something Lena had said. Start small. One new thing this week. I didn't know what new meant for a woman like me. I'd been sewing and baking and gardening for decades. I'd kept house, raised a child, buried a husband. What new thing could there possibly be? Still, I dressed, slowly, carefully. My knees hurt, my back felt tight, but I chose a nice blouse anyway, blue with soft white flowers. I put on earrings, the small silver ones Carl bought me when he was 9, with money he'd saved from selling lemonade. I touched them once, a small, quick gesture, then grabbed my purse. I didn't know where I was going, but I was going. The car started on the 3rd try. It always does, but I still worry every time, like the engine is testing whether I deserve mobility today. I backed out of the driveway, hands tight on the wheel. For a moment, I considered driving to Carl's house. The thought rose automatically, some old muscle memory reaching for a routine long dead. But I turned the wheel the other way. I drove without aim, letting the roads decide for me. Houses blurred past, porches with flower pots, children's bikes left on sidewalks, mailboxes leaning slightly from years of use. Life happening all around me, unaware of the quiet woman driving through it. Eventually, I passed the community center. The sign outside read, Senior Morning Social, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. I slowed the car. Then I stopped. I stared at the front door like it was something dangerous. Strange how a room full of people my age felt more intimidating than an entire backyard of people who ignored me. For a long moment, I just sat there, watching from behind the windshield. 2 older men walked in, chatting loudly. A woman with a bright scarf waved to someone inside. The door opened, and laughter spilled out onto the sidewalk. Warm, familiar, the kind that wraps around you without asking for anything. I turned off the engine. My fingers lingered on the keys. My heart wasn't racing, but it was alert, awake. Just one new thing, I whispered to myself. I locked the car and walked toward the door. The moment I stepped inside, the smell of coffee and old carpet hit me, oddly comforting, like libraries or school auditoriums. Tables were arranged in small clusters. People were talking over pastries. A volunteer played soft music from a speaker. Not too loud, not too fast. Music for people whose lives had outlasted tempo. I hovered near the entrance, unsure where to go or whom to nod at. I didn't want attention, not yet. I just wanted a place to sit, a place where no one would ask why I was still alive. Then I heard a voice. Mabel? I turned. It was Irene, a woman I used to see at the grocery store. We'd spoken a few times in produce, about bruised apples, rising prices, weather. Harmless, simple conversations that meant little at the time. But today, they meant everything. Oh, hello, I said, surprised at how relieved I felt. You're joining us? She asked, smiling openly. I thought I might, I answered. Well, come on then. We were just about to start a card game. Card game.
Not bridge, thank God, but something simpler. I followed her to a table where two other women sat. They looked up and smiled warmly, the kind of smile that actually reached the eyes. "This is Mabel," Irene introduced. "She's tough at carts, so watch out." I let out a small laugh. "I'm rusty, actually." "Rusty is still better than defeated," one woman said, scooting over to make room. I sat down, and the world didn't shift. Nothing dramatic happened. No spotlight, no music. Just a chair, a deck of cards, a few women making space for me. But I felt something small loosen inside my chest. The game lasted an hour, maybe longer. I wasn't good at it. In fact, I lost most rounds. But I laughed, just a little, and it felt strange. Like testing an old muscle, like remembering how to breathe after holding it too long. At one point, someone said something funny and we all broke into easy laughter. I felt warmth rise in my eyes unexpectedly, but I blinked it away before anyone noticed. They didn't need to see that kind of vulnerability. Not yet. When the game ended, Irene touched my arm. "Come again tomorrow," she said casually, as though the invitation was obvious, natural. Tomorrow, a day with a place I could go, a place where I wasn't a ghost. "I think I will," I said, and I meant it. When I got home, the house didn't feel as hollow. It was still quiet, still old, still mine, but it felt slightly less like a tomb and more like a home again. I set my purse down and walked to the window. The afternoon sun glowed golden through the glass, warming the wooden floor. I watched it a long time. Then I made myself tea, sat in my armchair, felt something I hadn't felt in a while. Something like the beginning of belonging. But healing isn't a straight line. It never is. That evening, the memories came back harder than usual. Carl as a baby, Carl as a teenager, Carl moving out, then back in after his heart was broken, then moving out again when he met Jody. Small moments, scattered through time like breadcrumbs leading to somewhere I no longer belonged. I touched the earrings he bought me, the ones I wore that day. I remembered him handing them to me with tiny, chubby hands and the proudest smile a 9-year-old could have. It hurt, but the pain didn't crush me the way it used to. It just sat beside me. Companion-like. Familiar. I whispered into the empty room, "I miss you, Carl." No one answered. I didn't expect them to, but for the first time, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It just felt like truth.
The next morning, I woke with a strange sense of purpose. Not excitement, purpose. I showered, dressed, chose the green blouse, put on the silver earrings again, then I left the house. Not to go to Carl's, not to deliver food no one appreciated, but to go someplace where people had smiled when they saw me. A small beginning, a quiet beginning, the first step of a healing I didn't know I was capable of. I woke before the sun, something my body had learned over decades of early mornings. Nursing babies, preparing breakfast, checking locks twice, sometimes 3 times. But today wasn't habit. Today was purpose. There's a different kind of waking when the mind has already decided what the heart has been too tired to say out loud. I sat at the edge of the bed, feeling the stiff pull in my knees, the quiet ache across my lower back, the weight of 70 years gathered inside my bones. Funny how a body remembers everything, even when the people who caused it forget. The room was still. The neighborhood was still. And somewhere in that silence, I found what I needed. I dressed slowly, not out of frailty, but out of care. I chose my soft gray shawl, the one my daughter bought for me years ago, before she left, before things grew cold between us.
I placed the last remaining photo of my late husband back into the drawer. He wouldn't want to see what I planned to do today, or maybe he would. Hard to tell, after a lifetime of swallowing my own voice so his could echo louder. By the time I stepped outside, the morning carried that early chill that makes your fingertips feel like glass. But the air was sharp in a good way. It made me feel awake, alive, determined. I walked the 3 blocks to Martha's house, the same path I'd walked yesterday and the day before that, carrying that peach cobbler, carrying my foolish hope of belonging, carrying the shame of what I heard behind that wooden gate. Why is she even still alive? The sentence had burrowed so deep, I could still hear the way her laugh cracked after it. Light, careless, almost bored. The sound people make when talking about something that doesn't matter. Except, it was me. Me, and my years, and my loneliness, and my attempts to stay connected in a world that walks faster every day. Her backyard was empty this morning. No string lights, no chattering friends, just the faint smell of ashes from last night's fire pit. I walked slowly to the spot where I'd stood when her words reached me. A simple wooden gate. It hadn't changed overnight, but I had. I looked around. No one. No witnesses, just the cold truth of what must be done. I reached into my bag and pulled out the sealed envelope I'd written last night, addressed in my neat cursive, to Martha. Inside was everything I'd held back for years, every kindness she twisted, every moment she made me feel like a burden, every time she smiled while slicing me open with words she pretended weren't sharp. I placed the envelope through the mail slot. Then I turned and walked away. But I didn't go home. No, this morning was not meant for endings alone. It was meant for beginnings. Real ones. I made my way to the community center at the far end of the neighborhood. I'd walked past it so many times but never stepped inside. I always told myself I was too old for new people, too slow for new routines, and too late for new life. But being too old to matter, as Martha so easily implied, was far worse than being too old to start. Inside, the receptionist, a young man with round glasses and a soft voice, looked up and smiled. "Good morning. How can I help you?" I felt something shift at me when he said that. A simple sentence spoken politely, but it felt like an invitation to breathe again. "I'd like to join something." I said, "Anything you have for, well, older women." He pulled out a pamphlet. "We actually have a storytelling group for seniors. They meet every Thursday. Would you like to sign up?" Storytelling. Imagine that. After a lifetime of being talked over, dismissed, hushed, told to let things go, the idea of speaking and being heard felt like a warm hand placed gently on my shoulder. "Yes," I said. "I think I would." He handed me a small form and a pen. My hand trembled, not from age but from the unfamiliarity of taking space for myself. When I was done, he smiled again, the kind of smile people give when they're genuinely happy to include you. It was small, but small things had been missing from my life for too long. "Your first meeting is tomorrow at 10 a.m. We'd love to have you." Have me. Two simple words that softened something inside my chest. I walked back home slower, not out of exhaustion, but reflection. The streets seemed lighter, Or maybe I was.
When I entered my house, the quiet didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt like rest, the kind of quiet you choose, not the kind forced on you by people who forget your value. I spent the afternoon making tea and sitting by the window, watching the sun paint the sky. I thought about my life, all its chapters, the ones written in joy and the ones written in silence. I thought about my daughter, somewhere far away, living her own story. I thought about the friends I'd lost over the years, to distance, to time, to death. And I thought about Martha, whose voice once mattered too much. I wondered what she would say when she read the letter. Would she feel guilt, or brush it off with another laugh? Would she deny the words she spoke, or pretend they weren't meant to hurt? I realized it didn't matter. That letter wasn't for her understanding. It was for my freedom. As evening settled in, I lit a single candle, the habit of a woman who likes to see the world soften before bed. The flame flickered gently, steady, alive. I touched my fingers lightly to my throat, surprised at the warmth there, the absence of heaviness. My breath felt full. My chest felt open. Funny how speaking the truth, even silently, even on paper, can loosen knots tied 30 years deep. Later that night, I heard footsteps outside. Slow, hesitant, then a knock. I opened the door to find Martha standing there, her eyes red, her voice small in a way I'd never heard before. I read your letter," she whispered. I didn't know you felt all that." "You never asked," I replied gently. She swallowed, staring down at her hands. "You're right. I didn't. And what I said yesterday? It was cruel. I'm so sorry." Her apology didn't erase the sting. It didn't undo the sentence I'd carried like a bruise. But it did something else. It closed the chapter without reopening the wound. I nodded. "Thank you for saying that." She looked relieved, though I didn't invite her inside. I didn't need to. Not anymore. Some relationships don't need rebuilding, they need redefining. Arm's length, polite, nothing more. After she left, I closed the door with a quiet finality. Not the sound of shutting someone out, but of welcoming myself in. For the first time in years, I felt the shape of my own life again. Not an extra, not a burden, not a woman waiting to be included. A woman claiming her space. The next morning, I walked into the storytelling group. A circle of women, gray hair, wrinkled hands, bright eyes looked up and smiled at me. Real smiles, full of warmth I didn't have to earn. "Welcome," one of them said. "Come sit with us." And just like that, I did. I sat, I breathed, I began. Not a story of pain, not a story of being cast aside, but a story of a woman who lived long enough to reclaim herself. And that, I realized, was the truest ending I could ever have. Not revenge, not bitterness, not victory over someone else, but peace. Hard won, deeply felt, quietly powerful peace. A beginning disguised as an ending.